Hello, welcome back. Let's go to our first panel discussion of the event today. That's the impact of AI on diversity and inclusion. So let me introduce our panel of guests today. First up, we have Saurav Roy, CEO at the Centre for Big Synergy, Helen Milner, CEO at the Good Things Foundation, Peter Serafaridis, who's founder and CEO at the Cultural Infusion, and also with us, Adam Kanamana, founder at Sprijitzu. So thank you so much for joining us all. Great to see you all today.
Hi, morning.
Morning. Right, I'm going to do something I don't normally do, and it's really important that we understand a little bit more about each of you and what you all do before we crack into the conversation. So I'm going to do a very traditional Zoom go round the room so everyone can introduce themselves, and just in 30 seconds a bit about what you and your organisation do. I think it'll just help us set out the context for today. So Saurav, if we could start with you first, please.
Thank you very much for having me on the panel, Anil. So I am the co-founder and CEO of Centre for Big Synergy. Centre for Big Synergy is a CSO of the UN DESA. It's a facilitator of SDG projects. We work with governments, civil society, and businesses, all with the same objective to further any SDG initiatives or projects they're involved in. And the range of projects varies from awareness programs for children or unemployed youth or women to working with the government on policies, as well as educational programs with schools and universities, to running the world's biggest sustainability film festival with Oscar, BAFTA, and Emmy Award winners, which we've just concluded for this year. And the winners will be screened on Europe's biggest screen, Piccadilly Lights, in day after tomorrow. So it's a wide variety of projects we're involved in. So and a huge pool of stakeholders we directly are involved in. And that probably gives us the edge and the ability to glean those insights as I'm going to share today.
Lovely. Thank you very much indeed. And I respect the shameless plug you chucked into that as well for the event coming up on the big screen. Helen, if we can come to you next, please. And if your background is anything to go by, we are talking about the digital divide with you as well. So yeah, if you could go ahead and introduce yourself and the work you do.
Absolutely. Morning, everyone. So I'm Helen Milner. I'm the Group Chief Executive at Good Things Foundation. So we're a digital inclusion charity working at scale across the whole of the UK and the whole of Australia. And we work with thousands of community organisations to reach and help millions of people, both with the basic digital skills that they need, digital literacy, AI literacy, but also access. So we help people with free connectivity, for example, 500,000 people with free connectivity in the UK and free devices through the refurbishment of devices. And we work in an advocacy role and an engagement role with government and with big businesses. And we also work at that hyperlocal level in communities with excluded people from all different ethnic backgrounds, all different needs, all different challenges to, as it says on the tin, to fix the digital divide.
Yeah, that's a bit of a sneaky hint on your background there. Thank you, Helen. Peter, if I can come to you next, please.
Thank you and good evening, everyone, from Melbourne, Australia. I'm Peter Musafiriadis, and I'm the CEO and founder of Cultural Infusion, which gave birth to Diversity Atlas. Cultural Infusion has this big vision of building a world that's culturally harmonious, and the way we do that is through education programs, which we're currently delivering to more than 350,000 students across Australia. We have a whole range of experience programs. And back in 2015, the question was put to me, what is diversity? How would you know whether you were more or less diverse? And we started to embark on this journey of being able to try to define diversity. And we ended up with Diversity Atlas, which is now being utilised across the world by organisations as small as 50 all the way to Amazon. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Peter, and I speak for our entire audience. It is the finest moustache I've ever had on this stage by quite some distance, so huge respect for that. And Adam, if
I might share a story with everyone and how that came about.
Okay, I look forward to that. That's another creative tease. We'll come back to that at the end, remind me. And Adam, if I can come to you last, please.
Of course, yes. My name is Adam or Ahmad Karnama, and I'm the founder of a company called Sprijitzu that we do energy traceability and making sure that you can track the source of the energy consumption. The company is powered by Aubin Foundation, which is an impactful, innovative ecosystem that we promote diversity and sustainability across the board by building one school in each country. And it is an impact fund that we invest also in the businesses that they follow the sustainability and diversity standards that we want to promote in our world. Pleasure to be part of this event from surprisingly sunny Stockholm at this part of the year. Yeah.
A truly international panel as well. So thank you so much for joining us. There's so much to cover off, and you're all coming to this from slightly different directions, which is fantastic for a panel where everyone just agrees with each other and you feel deeply sorry for the person who has to go forth. So where I'd like to start really is how AI systems can unintentionally perpetuate bias, whether it's in the workplace or in general society. Sourav, if I can start with you, please. What are your thoughts on that? How can these systems unintentionally perpetuate bias?
Sure, I think that's a very vital point, Neil. And we've seen recent examples of bias in AI systems with Amazon's AI system, for example, preferentially picking male employees than females, for example, or I think Apple's credit card rating system giving lower scores to women in that aspect. So this is absolutely paramount to ensure that any new upcoming DEI systems driven by AI is fair and transparent. So I think 4 key stages that any AI tool that DEI would utilize from, starting from the data to the process that's then used to train the system, to the system that finally is produced, so the running AI tool, as well as the governance that finally is utilized or used to ensure that the system works as it is expected to be, both internal governance and external, so compliance and regulation in general. In all of these steps, I think we need to ensure that whatever we are doing, we are ensuring that the principles of the system are upheld. So, for example, if we are selecting data, we need to ensure that we are able to prepare the data in the first place the way it should be. I'm sure we'll come on these sort of topics later on in the conversation, and probably others can complement me as well. But there is, frankly, shortage of data that can be used for the AI systems to learn from and produce systems that would be impartial, fair, and equitable. So that's probably the biggest hurdle to begin with. There is already ongoing work in the area, and I'm sure the others will expand on it. But as a top line, I think these are the key 4 different areas. And in all of these areas, there's more than enough work for DEI leaders and major organizations, especially if they're not a tech company or a tech organization, to ensure that we avoid bias.
Thank you. Helen, if I can come to you next. As I said, you're coming to this from a slightly different perspective, more with the lens of the digital divide. Do you fear there's a bias there that can widen that divide?
Absolutely. So I think that I think we're probably still, some people's jury is still out about whether or not AI is going to completely transform the world, or whether it's the latest hype that, unfortunately, I'm old enough to remember when we thought the fax machines were going to transform education across the world. And obviously that never happened. But I think AI is different. I think that AI is absolutely going to change the way that technology impacts on all of us, on our society and on our communities. And so that it can be a force for good. So we can use AI to help us to create the tools and the platforms that will help us to even out some of the inequalities in our society. But at the moment, there's obviously a clear issue with biases in the algorithms, as Sourav has just said, about the kind of lack of data that really represents the communities that we live in and the people for whom these tools are already being used on. But one of the things that we very much are looking at AI literacy as part of digital literacy. So one of our strategic partners is Accenture, and they're working with us to really understand that fundamental point about how can AI how can we begin to make sure that AI literacy is part of digital literacy? And that means that when we're fixing the digital divide, when we're helping people with skills for today's world, that AI is part of that. So sometimes that's about don't be scared of it, that it's already there, it's already a tool that you can use, but also being aware of when it's already being used for you and what the future might mean. And as Saurav was saying, if you're being declined for a loan and a bot has done that, then maybe go back and go in and knock on someone on the bank's door and go and actually speak to a human about that. So some of it is about how to navigate the world we're currently living in, and some of this is about future looking 3 years ahead, 5 years, 10 years ahead, and how can we make sure that everybody has the basic skills. This is about using AI, being part of society where AI is there, and what do people need to be looking out for. And in Australia, the team in Australia worked with Telstra and Microsoft on a program actually working with migrant women to actually look at what their perspectives were around AI, to make sure that we were developing AI literacy for that specific target group, as well as doing consultation with thought leaders and community leaders across Australia. So we've got quite a lot of experience, but we think that this isn't something that we should wait and then start on, that this is clearly such a big issue for our society, a big opportunity for our society, global society, that this is something that we should be working on now.
Absolutely. Peter, if we can come to you next on that, the unintentional perpetuation of bias within the workplace.
Yeah, look, I might take everyone back to 1989 when Tim Berners-Lee gifted us the World Wide Web. In a short period of time, the world experienced massive economic globalization without globalization of values and ethics. In 2007, we saw the rise of social media and how social media in many ways began to drive a lot of conflict. We saw how it fueled the Arab Spring. We're seeing how social media is allowing people to get caught up in these echo chambers, and we're seeing the intense polarization that's coming about with social media. 2022, almost 2 years to the date, ChatGPT exploded on the marketplace. 1 million people embraced it within, 5 days, and now we've got, half the world using ChatGPT. But, if you go back to 2007, there's been a steady declining piece across the globe since the rise of social media, and it's been declining steadily. And if you look at the cost of conflict in the world, which has a cultural dimension, it equates to something like $14.5 trillion, according to the Global Peace Index. We're talking huge amounts of money. So when you add to that how we treat people with disabilities, gender inequality, exclusion, we're talking about 20% of the global GDP is lost every single year. So what do I frame my discussion with all of that in the beginning? Well, it's because bias is baked into every system, and the algorithms, we know this for a fact. And Facebook, Meta, Google, talking to this at the moment, is that these algorithms are being developed with the assumption that we're all coming from the same place, not only socially, but culturally. And, when we talk about AI, it's working with data. What type of data is it working with? It's data that comes from culture. It's data that comes from the lived experience. So when we talk about cultures, just to give you an idea with Diversity Atlas, we have been able to map out more than 9,200 languages and speech communities across the globe. We have something like 8,500 ethno-linguistic people groups, equally as many ancestral groups, and something like 8,200 secular and non-secular traditions in the world. ChatGPT is only available in 80 languages. How is it going to be able to embrace the complexity of cultural diversity in the world out there? This is humanity's greatest asset. Is it going to be leaving people out? And it is leaving people out. If you look at the word love, for example, in my culture, we have 20 different types of word for love. So when someone says to me, love is love, I'm thinking, what type of love are they talking about? Well, if you go to Thailand, there are 80 types of, 80 different words for smile. So how do we start to really, through this work, embrace the diversity in these discussions? And rather than start to box people, into these categories, how can we start to explore the complexity of human identity and how that intersects with, gender, expression, gender identity, age, position type within an organization, position level, because that allows us to understand how equity might be playing out. So I'm concerned that if we embrace AI too quickly without being able to start to develop inclusive data sets, so we're not leaving anyone out, then we may begin to perpetuate exclusion, difference, inequality. And that number of $14.3 trillion will continue to exponentially increase across the globe. And that's my biggest concern with AI. So I'm all for it, but I think we just need to tread with a lot of caution.
Absolutely. And I will say, Peter, that I believe ChatGPT is rather biased against myself, because in a moment of extreme vanity, I put my name into ChatGPT to find out what had happened to me or something in my career, and it told me I died in a car crash in 2018. I would like to say the reports of my demise have been greatly overstated. Moving on. Anyway, Adam, let's come to you from a software sort of point of view on this. Your thoughts about perpetuating bias?
Yeah, I think that in my view, maybe going a bit more technical on the exact technical software developments of the systems connected to a DNI, there is a fundamental difference between the DNI related topics in AI and then the other topics that we are dealing with. Imagine weather forecast, for example. In the weather forecast, you look at the history data. As much as history data that you have, it helps you to have an AI system to forecast the weather in a much proper manner. But then when it comes to DNI questions, I think that the history data is not working in favor of us. I think we are going to change that perspective that has happened in the past into the future. And then it shouldn't be a sort of a fundamental change that would drive a not necessarily good changes, but then the balance that we want to make from those AI systems is challenging. And then we need, sometimes I think that we don't need to sort of rely on the data that we get from the AI system for DNI connected type of concerns that we have there. So in my view, I think the history data, I don't think that we need to forget the importance of that. I think a lot of decisions that we make is based on the history, but then there is a big caveat here that we need to understand that we want to change something on this DNI connected from what has happened to us in the past and what we want to plan and we want to develop in the future, basically. And then if I go like to 3 levels of the data acquisition, on the algorithm developments and the results that we get, I mentioned about the data that we need to have the data, history data to be in a proper manner, that we get the right data, not always rely on the history data to see what should happen in the future. The algorithms that we develop, there should be a lot of concerns and a lot of sort of digging into details when we develop the algorithm. So, and then when we get the results, I think that is important to understand that we don't over rely on the AI results. I think we should have human intervention in making the decisions based on the way that we want to set the future for us in the DNI topics related, is if it is recruitment, if it is promotions within the organizations, or whatever sort of ways of managing the organization in the future. There shouldn't be a sort of only focusing on the AI data that we get and then make all the decision based on those. There should be still a sort of good level of human intervention in the outputs from the data algorithms in order to make the right decision for our future. I don't think that the structures that we set for ethical AI are not sort of there in order to rely a lot on the outputs from the AI system. As you mentioned, the output from the ChatGPT cannot be 100% reliable type of output. So I think that, to just summarize, having the right history data, not to always rely on the history data that we get, and then also make sure that there is a right level of human intervention on the outputs in order to make the right decision, basically. I think that could be my 2 cents into that conversation. Yeah.
Thank you, Adam. Let's move on a little. I want to be a bit more glass half full for a moment, if I can, about how AI can be used to improve diversity and inclusion efforts. Helen, this was something you briefly alluded to, so we'll start with you on that. How do you feel that can happen? How can AI be used to improve D&I efforts?
I think that's
sorry, Adam. If I could just start with Helen, and then we'll come back around to you in a second.
Yeah.
Thank you, Adam. I appreciate how keen you are, though.
Yeah, I think that Helen and Adam obviously sound the same.
Yeah, that was it.
So I think that it's back to what you're actually saying there about the glass being half full. So seeing what the opportunities are, and also as it's an emerging, I'm going to say it's an emerging technology because obviously there's a technology aspect to it. But my point of view, where always I look at tech, is that this is about people, right? So if we talk about organizations, we're talking about society, we're talking about cultures, we're talking about countries. We're actually talking about people. So people still are developing this technology, but then using it and choosing how to use it. And as Adam said, I 100% agree that there should be a good level of human intervention, but also it's about thinking forward as a business about how do we want to bring AI into what we're doing. So, for example, at Good Things Foundation, we in the UK support over 5,000 hyperlocal organisations, small charities, libraries, housing, social housing providers. And obviously we have a huge CRM and we also get lots of phone calls and lots of emails from all of them to say that they want to apply for funding or they want to have some more SIMs from the National Data Bank. So actually AI would be a really good way to help us with this. This is a very basic customer service. There'll be basic uses for that we can bring in. But actually, when we're thinking about equality and diversity, we also need to think about, so who are the humans in our organizations who are using the technology, right? So in that example, that's a customer service. So the people who are currently doing customer service, the people who are currently dealing with those emails, with those calls, they, for me, need to be the people who are actually determining where we have the bottlenecks, where can technology help, where will we need to bring the human intervention in. So they will actually be the ones that understand how the customers, or in this case, the community organizations, all of those thousands of partners are wanting to interact with ourselves and with our services and the support that they need. So basically what I'm saying is that it can be a massive benefit if we see this not as being something that is the domain of the technologists, although I love technologists and they have to have a role in this, but also of the people for whom within the business are going to be actually their roles changing, but let's co-design and co-create those processes and those solutions with those people. And then that will be, by definition, making that much more equal and diverse. If you already have good equality and diversity strategies within your organization, then you ought to have a good, diverse and equal workforce, but though making sure that you're involving all of them in this future thinking about bringing technology in and about how it can be used, but how it can be used for them, but also for the people that they're supporting or their customers, however you want to frame that.
Thank you. Peter, if we can come to you next on that, how AI can be used to improve D&I efforts.
Yeah, I think Helen made an excellent point. We need to become more people-centric. And if technologists are doing an amazing job, I started off working in the cultural industries, trying to understand the complexity of culture and how it intersects with identity, diversity, inclusion, business performance. And then I accidentally fell into technology, thanks to my CTO, Reza Mayuni, who introduced me to trying to understand this area in terms of metrics and data. And I'd like to say that there's no doubt that AI is going to be able to assist us with inclusive recruitment strategies, finding diverse talent, improving workplace culture. But how is it going to allow us to discover the hidden diversity in an organization? So if you go into an organization of 1,000 people or into an organization like Amazon, which is 1 million people, all these people aren't the same at the end of the day. They're going to be different age, they're going to have different cultures that they're going to equate with, they're going to have different ways of how they're going to make sense of the sense of all living things around us. And to us, Well, let me just say, I'm going to wear my Peter's hat now. And, diversity, they say, is an act, and diversity is a fact, inclusion is an act. And what we say is that if you want to act, you need the fact. So you need the data at the end of the day. So data is, vitally important. And I'm talking data in terms of human identity once again, because that allows you then to develop a whole range of intervention strategies. And I believe AI has still got a long way to catch up with this. In our organization, we've come up through our Diversity Atlas platform, 700 trillion different combinations with 90% of the most common selected answers. So, we're talking massive numbers, and I'm not too sure if the computational technology is still available to us. And we're using enormous computational technology to be able to see how identity intersects with experience so we can inform strategies so we're not leaving anyone out. How can we create fairer systems? I think it all comes back to data once again. And, coming back to Helen's point, we need to become people-centric, and we need to really understand what do we mean when we say diversity. Diversity just means difference. It doesn't mean anything more than that. So how do we understand that difference? And there are, metrics that you can apply to this difference. Variety, balance, which allows you to understand what that distribution of that diversity or, that language that you might be looking at, or that attribute across an organization, let's say it's gender, for example, or you might be looking at languages and you want to understand the metric of disparity. What is the dissimilarity of those languages, for example, or those people groups? So let's say in one group you had an Italian, French and Portuguese speaking person, and in another group you had an Italian, Arabic and Japanese. Well, the diversity there is going to be much greater. And why is that important? Because one's ethno-linguistic background shapes cognitive processes, gives expression and meaning to absolutely every single encounter. And then another metric is mutuality. To what extent are these organizations that we're working with, to what extent are they reflecting the communities that they're operating in? So what I'm trying to set up here is this sort of framework that we've developed in our organization, which I believe can start to inform AI so it can create a greater sophistication in how we really respond to people's needs and ensure that we're not leaving anyone out.
Yeah, I think that sophistication, that's the key point there, absolutely there. Adam, if we can come to you next, please.
Yeah, I think that complementing what Peter, Helen mentioned in that space, we need to have a right analysis of the data with the AI, that the data is the history data I mentioned about the caveat to the data that we acquire. We need to make sure that the data that we acquire coming from multiple data sources, we have the variety of the data, there is no bias in the data. I think that's important. But then again, in the algorithm developments, it makes sure that the algorithm that is being developed, it is on the right track. But then the positive way is like that we analyze the data and we bring the right report and insights for the decision makers to make the right decision in that environment that they want to consider D&I as a sort of important element inside the decision making. Imagine if it is a sort of a recruiting process in a large organization, we need to make sure that the right amount of data is acquired. We have the output of the AI algorithm that we find the gaps. I mean, is there any sort of payment gap? Is there a sort of lack of the ability to make a drive in the organization that we want to make? I think those elements of gaps we need to find within the AI algorithm reports that we get there. But again, it comes back to that element of human intervention that, again, we are dealing with the humans that they make those important decisions at the end of the day. And we need to have the right engagements and the right sort of education, I can say it, in order for those leaders to make the right decision based on those inputs that it is sort of new. Those inputs are new. I mean, maybe without AI, we could not get those insights, deep insights about those topics, finding the gaps and understanding where we are right now. But eventually, it is the human intervention, the leaders in those organizations that are going to make the decisions and then drive the things to go forward. And then, for example, at Aubin Foundation, we're trying to channel the investment to the right sort of businesses that are not only making the right impact, but also they are, from the business perspective, they're making multiples of the revenue as well. So I think that those angles are not sort of in contradiction. So we need to also channel the investments into the right direction. It is not a short-term type of results that we can get from those decisions and those insights that we get that ends up in the decision. It takes time, it takes long time, but then we need to be strategically channeling the financing, the decision making toward making a better sort of future, that future, I think, that is more equal, we are more inclusive. Let me make sure that from different parts of the ethnic or gender, we have the right representation and right opportunity for everyone to be part of the engagements and the work that we are pushing for.
Now, Adam, the talk about leadership and decision makers, that's a thread I want to come back to next. So do remind me of that if I get distracted and go off on something else. But Saurav, if we can come to you next and finally on this point about how AI can be used to improve D&I efforts.
Thank you, Neil. I think it has untapped potential to do so, and the other panelists have already brought up so many wonderful points. I would probably just pick a couple. One is education, as Adam just pointed out, and education of the DEI leaders, and the second is the fact that this is an ongoing process. It's a marathon. It's not a sprint. So why do I say education? Because imagine if you're a SME or even a company which is a non-tech company, someone who makes shoes, for example, and they want to use a AI tool for hiring and evaluation and assessment, etc. Now, that's probably going to be made by a tech company who has no idea, or they probably have learned about the business, and then they're trying to have a nuanced approach to recruitment for that particular company. Now, if the DEI leaders are not well informed, not well educated to understand what kind of data was fed to the systems for the data learning process, for example, they would have no clue as to how reliable the whole process is. So they are already trying to have synthetic data fed to such learning machines, as well as they're trying data augmentation, as I know, to change the weightage points because there is no historical data for certain demographics that they want the AI tool to be then using. And these are risks, in fact. And if the DEI leaders are not aware of these risks that come with such tools, which may be compliant or non-compliant at this point of time, but probably will be compliant in due course anyways, they will fall short of making sense of how to use it in the best way. And I'm talking about the non-tech companies. For the tech companies, it's probably easier. So that level of education and knowledge of knowing what kind of data should have been used to develop these models is vitally important. They also need to understand that Adam and the other have time and again emphasized the human in the loop requirement for all sort of AI models. That's absolutely vital. The vital decision-making point should always have a human checkpoint, at least to begin with. And as we evolve, probably lesser of that. Or this is a black swan area, to be very honest. The unknown unknowns will come out as we go ahead and keep on developing newer models. So I think the DEI leaders have a very vital role in understanding what sort of technology was used to develop the tools, if they have to use it in their own organizations. Be patient, be adaptive, and keep an eye on governance so that they can reap the best benefits out of the systems.
Thank you, Saurav. And you've led me on to the decision makers and leadership question there as well. So I'm not sure if you can see my notes from where you're sitting at the moment. So thank you for that.
I can, in fact.
That's very helpful. Thank you very much indeed. I'll start with you on this, if I could, Adam, because you were the first to bring up the leadership question. What would you like to see coming from D&I leadership when it comes to AI? How much influence should there be? What are the key things you feel they should be doing?
Yeah, I think that, first of all, we don't want to overestimate the role of AI in this sort of environment. Of course, AI is a tool that, with the history and the data that we acquire, it can give you invaluable insights to make the right decision. So I think that that's the important part. We need to make sure that experience of getting the insights to be as diverse as possible, with multiple scenarios, with a lot of things to start the food for thoughts. I think that this is the important thing. So I see that people, they think that AI is a tool that you can get the outputs and then use it in whatever format. For example, some of the colleagues get the outputs from ChatGPT on whatever they get, and then they use it in their writings and everything. It is not meant to be like that. We are using AI as an input to the important decision makings, and that important decision making process, it is super complex. And it has a lot of elements inside that decision making that AI can be an input, give you the insights to make the right decision. And what I mean from the right is to consider many things that are changing in our world. I'm not in favor of a disruptive change in that environment. I think that we need to make step-by-step changes in the workplace, in the different angles of our workplace, with the insights from AI, to make the improvements step by step and make it a sustainable change and a sustainable type of environments that we are making. I mean, normally disruptive changes, they're not meant to be 100% sustainable either. So in that sense, I think we don't overestimate. We see AI as a great insight for the decision makers. And those decision makers with many AI tools, they need to educate themselves how to make the right decision from those wide range of insights that you can get with the AI. You can get a lot of information, you can get a lot of insights that they might bias you as well in many senses. So I think that we have moved from that thinking that insight making is difficult. Now is decision making with those amount of insights is difficult, and is a good difficult, because we are going to make more educated decisions that we need to make sure that those decision makers, they have the right tools, they have the right insights and the right education in order to progress in the D&I topics that we are going to achieve together.
Thank
if
you,
I could
Adam.
just chime in there and just add that I feel that the majority of DEI leaders out there have overlooked the importance of holistic data sets. I recently published an article about 12 days ago called Democratized Data Sets, Valuing People for Who They Are. And much of the backlash, I believe, we've seen against DEI, and we've seen a lot of it across the world, has been as a result of overly broad categories for humans that are dehumanizing and divisive. And what a lot of DEI leaders haven't been able to do is see how, take an intersectional lens to this work, take a multifactorial lens. So if we're looking at gender, are we looking at how that individual, how does their identity as a woman or non-gender binary person or a man intersect with, their ethnicity, with their religion, what disability do they have? I mean, this is really important because that allows us to take a holistic approach. And my concern with AI, and I've been experimenting with it quite a bit, I'm often finding that it's hallucinating. Stuff comes out of this black box, a bit like our human beings. We come up with amazing imaginative ideas, and AI is doing it all the time. So we need to tread very carefully. And I come back to what I said earlier on. It's still early days for us, and I think we just need to be really patient, and we need to really just come back to this idea of, are we making sure that we're not leaving anyone out, and are we really capturing those hidden aspects of diversity in an organization, which once again, really inform how people interact with each other.
Thank you, Peter. Saurav, we can come to you next, please.
Sure. So I think as the others have touched upon, it's the transparency of the system, which is something I guess the leaders should pay a lot of attention to understand that what they're employing is essentially what it is supposed to do. Keep up their education and knowledge and understanding around the subject, as I've already touched upon briefly, so that they make good use of those technologies. And thirdly, I think is be open to the unknown, because this is an evolving field, and we are all learning in this field as we grow older. And it's vital that the leaders are able to remain unbiased themselves, which is quite a difficult task, and be exposed to as many demographies of within the organizations they are leading, because only then with that actual human interaction and human touch can they develop the empathy and the knowledge that they would require to evaluate these systems and make sure that the systems are running as they expect those to run. But I think one crucial element in all of this is, and I can't emphasize it more, is the element of education, and this is where probably all of us has an important role to play, because it's we all in a job, when you're doing a job, you want convenience, and obviously it's so very easy to just reach out to a new tech that has come out and think, oh, this is convenient, this is going to take so many hours off my schedule, and I can do so much more, but that will lead to a very polar and easily fragmented society and workplace. So leaders have to be extremely careful as to not fall for it, like we've fallen for several technologies and now we are slaves to those, but use it more as a tool rather than as, and Adam has stressed many times, rather than the be all sort of go-to place to use, and hence we can have that human control still to be able to use it properly.
Oh, Sourav, thank you very much indeed. Helen, if we can go to you next, please.
Yeah, I think that it's really important that we think about leadership in all its guises, right? So I do a lot of work with government as well as with lots of business leaders. And I would say it's really important that people don't take their eye off the ball, that they don't see that this is just a flash in the pan. It's not important. It is important. It is a massively new technology. But I've always, because obviously my passion is about fixing the digital divide, is about leaving nobody behind, is like, let's all leaders think about all people. Right. So that whether or not this is about, being able to do your recruitment faster, or whether, like I was saying before, being able to do your customer service better, that these are tools. We are humans. We live together. We are leaders. We run countries. We run nations. We run companies. We run charities. Let's take our responsibility seriously, but that we're going to include everybody. And therefore, we have a huge digital divide in the UK. We're one of the richest nations in the world. We have 10 million people who are on the wrong side of that digital divide, and therefore we need to make sure that we do bring them into the digital society, into the digital world, but we do that in a way that is right, and that AI is coming, and therefore AI needs to be part of that digital future that they're going to be part of. So don't forget anybody. This is not about ivory towers. This is about an opportunity for democratization, and yes, education, and yes, using the right tools, and yes, having the right conversations, but think about everybody and leave nobody behind.
Helen, I will just say a quick thank you to the questions we've had coming in. Rhoda, Josh, Orla, Philippa. Hopefully we've got through most of the themes you were wanting to discuss in those particular questions, but we are right up on time now. And if I could just ask you all one final question looking to the future, and if you could try and answer in 30 seconds or so, I'd be very grateful, because we still need to talk about Peter's moustache before we go. That's essential. Your hopes for the future, just in 30 seconds. What is your hope about how AI can be used to aid DE&I? We'll start with Helen on this one, please.
Well, so if AI is going to give us a massive extra brain, then let's make sure that brain is working for the good of the globe, for the good of the nations, for the good of our organizations. And so let's make sure that we're feeding it in the right way, but always with equality and inclusion in the front of our mind, not an afterthought.
Thank you. Sourav, to you.
Yeah, I think AI in DEI is a business opportunity. It will positively impact the bottom line of the business, which should be the driver for all businesses to take massive steps in building its capability on it. And one key word, which I always use in all panels, nuance, because that probably is the core here. So you need to ensure that your AI systems are nuanced to make the maximum commercial output come out of it.
If we come to you, please, your hopes. Adam,
Sorry, was that me?
that was to you, Adam. Sorry.
Oh, to me. Okay. Yeah, of course. I think to me is super important that with a lot of insights that we are getting, we have the leaders that are well prepared, well educated to use that big insights that they are uniquely sort of positioned in the best manner to make our world a better place to live than the one that we currently have for our kids in the future. Yeah.
Thank you, Adam. Oh, we got a round of applause from Helen as well. Enjoyed that. Peter, the final word on that for me, please.
Well, thank you. And I'd like to say, how can we make sure we don't let survivorship bias get the better of us? And what I mean by that is, let's make sure we're not making decisions only on what we can't see and what we can see, but rather what we can't see. And how do we start to investigate what that invisible diversity is through AI, so we can start to interrogate the existing system, so we can improve it, so it doesn't leave any voice out, and make sure that we're giving the nuance that can really make the world a better place. Thank you.
Okay, and Peter, we've got to come to this last, the moustache question. Do give me the background very quickly.
Thank you very much. In 2016, I was invited to Lahore in Pakistan to chair the Lahore International Conference on Culture. And when I went to the museum there were these amazing Greco-Buddhist statues. And most people aren't aware that when the Greeks arrived in South Asia in 326 BC with Alexander, a lot of them arrived as polytheists, and then they converted to Buddhism. They became the protectorates of Buddhism, and then they began to personify the concept of Buddha. And very first personifications of Buddha were after Greco-Bactrian kings that had moustaches like the one that you see on my face. And that was the inspiration for the moustache. Thank you very much.
Well, I'm glad we asked that question. We needed to know. And that was also a fantastic creative tease to keep people watching for the whole panel. So thank you so much for joining us. Really enjoyed your company here today at Sustainability Live D&I.
Thank you.